Okay, welcome everybody. So this is the first sort of pre-recorded unit that I've put together. So this is for Unit 55, and it kind of gives you the opportunity to work at your own pace, really, to sort of maybe get ahead a bit. I'll sort of talk through the requirements on the way. So this presentation will be quite long, so the intention isn't that you will do it in one sitting. But I would try and encourage you to do each part in one sitting wherever possible. So I'll sort of talk you through that as we can. So the first units. So this is the units that we've covered. So we've done 26 and 27, and this is unit 55, which is developing your CV. So a little bit of this, it kind of crosses back to those previous two units. So I'm going to ask you to actually reflect on the first CV that you gave me. So if you have, if you sort of updated it and not saved the old one, you might need to contact me to get me to send back your first CV that you did. So it will all come clear. So you will need your original CV, the first one you gave me from Unit 26, or if you didn't, or if you haven't done that for me yet, the first CV you've got. So hopefully I'm looking at quite sort of rough CVs really. I don't want the finished article. So the first part is very much about giving feedback to you on that first CV. So we'll sort of talk through the first task, and you can sort of dig into your files and grab it for me. So this is the sort of the structure of this unit. What you can see is there's three kind of parts which I'll do individually. The first bit is called understanding feedback on a CV. So this is the bit where you submit your CV. I and one other colleague give you feedback on that CV, looking at things like the style, the content, the the sort of truthfulness of it, whatever, and then you make some changes. So I'll sort of give you those tasks soon. The second bit is be able to update a CV to meet job requirements, and you will already have done a little bit of that, so that should be a task that takes virtually no time. And then the last one is just to create a plan to keep an updated CV, and again that should be something that's is completed in a single page worksheet. So hopefully that's going to be able to be done very quickly. So my anticipation is this unit, you could do it in 2 days easy. So let's get on. So this is part one. So we're going to cover part one, which is about essentially sort of getting feedback on your CV. So the most of the assessment for this is done through what we call a professional discussion. So it'll be kind of a Zoom meeting where you will have prepared notes on the feedback that you got from your CV and a couple of other topics, and we will discuss. It might take 10 minutes, it could take 15, but essentially it's it's kind of a business-like meeting in a way to discuss your CV, discuss the changes that you think are appropriate to make to your CV, and really just make sure you've understood your feedback. So you're preparing for a recorded professional discussion discussion related to your CV. The first task will be to review the feedback you've received so far and make notes. You are asked to show these notes before your discussion. The second part is to show the changes that are or were needed to your CV. And finally, you're asked to discuss this feedback and discuss why a CV needs to be updated. So your first task then was to give me a copy of your CV. Now, most people have done this, and I've already sent back the feedback. So what your first task to do is to, once you've got that feedback, is to summarize the feedback that was given. So what you see here is on that right hand side, I've got a sheet that you're going to create to write down your notes. So the key thing here is, if you see at the top, I've got a name. I've got on the right hand side, I've made it quite messy, Unit 55, and then the title is Professional Discussion Notes for 1.1 and 1.2. So all you're doing is you're summarising the feedback on your CV, and you're putting it under those headings that I've given you there. So you've got style, you've got content, you've got length and suitability, and then there's last one at the bottom, it just says changes to make. So essentially what's going to happen is we discuss each of these elements of feedback, and then you identify the changes that you're going to make to your CV. So that's your task one, really. Essentially it's working through each of these parts, looking at the feedback that you've been given, and really saying, okay, did I need to change the style? Was there anything in the content? Was it about the spelling, the phrasing that I'm using? Was there anything about the length? Was I sort of too short in some sections? Was it too long in others? And was the CV suitable for the industry that I was applying for, or did it sound like it was maybe applying for, say, an office job or a retail job? And lastly, you just note down the changes that you're going to make. So the feedback that we cover is really looking at these 5 things on the left hand side: style, content, length, suitability, and changes to be made. So if we just take a quick look at this example CV, this is the sort of template that I gave you all. Now the first thing that you will have got some feedback on, or you get some idea of feedback on, is that style. Now this is a nice style. This is a very sort of business-like presentation. You'll see that where you have the we've got the personal statement at the top, which is great. We've got the name and address right at the very top, but under the personal statement it goes to key skills, and what you see is a short number of almost kind of bullet pointed key skills, and this is quite nice to see. They're not just single words, but there's a sort of one-line explanation, which I think is perfect. Just single words isn't enough. Whole long-winded explanations of key skills, and it starts to become a different type of personal statement. So this is quite a nice style. You'll see also that underneath the key skills it's got education. So this to me would suggest that this is a school leaver CV, whereas if it was a job changer CV, that work experience may come before education, because that's the sort of most recent, most relevant thing. So the style here is very professional. It's got all the sections in the right place. It's very easy to read. You can see that on the second page the work experience starts right at the top. There's not a heading at the bottom of page 1 and then all the content at the start of page 2. So the formatting is really good. In terms of the content, one of the things I picked up a lot is misplaced capital letters. I was looking at the odd typo. I was looking at the sort of the phrasing that people were using, just the way that they were describing themselves and describing their achievements. Some people possibly were writing a little bit too casually. Some people were maybe not able to back up some of the statements that they were showing. So, if you've put that you've got excellent numeracy, you need to kind of show where. Where have you done that? How have you demonstrated it? In terms of the length, a lot of people had personal statements who were pretty much bang on in terms of the length, but possibly not quite concise enough. You know, there was almost kind of repeating content again. Some people had very short education sections, not really listing even the name of the school they're in or the dates that they're in education. Some people had key skills where there was just long explanations endlessly, and that was a little bit long. You know, key skills should be there for someone to read quickly. Boom, boom, boom. Suitability. Well, if you've got a CV that looks like this, I'd say it's pretty much suitable for any job role. It looks nice and professional. It's quite neutral in a way. Some people were just looking. They didn't have sort of separate headings. The headings weren't in bold. So in a way, it wasn't suitable for submission. So on the whole, I wouldn't say people suffered from this too much. You know, the suitability was generally good. It fitted the industries that you were applying for. But you may have got some feedback just on how to make it a little bit more professional, a little bit more business-like, a little bit more suited to the industry that you're applying for. And lastly, changes to be made is something that you describe. So, you know, is it correcting typos? Is it changing the style, the content, the length, the suitability? So you need to just note down the key things. So I'd be looking for you to change a good sort of minimum of 5 things across on most CVs. So remember, this is using the notes page that you did on the previous slide. So if you need to go and review that, just pause the presentation or scroll back and have a look at it. But most of but essentially it's those headings that I really want you to prepare notes for. So you're looking over the CV feedback that I gave you, and you're preparing notes on that feedback that was given you on your first CV. So you've got your notes. And so again, so if we're looking at the style feedback you've got, was it using the appropriate CV template? Did it suit the style of the industry you're applying for? Was the font used that was appropriate? So some people did really weird sort of bold fonts and underlined areas. Was the content, was there any spelling mistakes? Was there changes needed to grammar or phrasing? And were there any other errors outlined? Again, length. Does the CV fit neatly onto 2 pages? So generally, you know, 2 pages is the ideal. It's the industry standard. Were any areas too long? And were any areas, that should say too short. I keep forgetting to change that. Were any areas too short? That should say. And again, the suitability. Was the CV suitable for the job you were applying for? And did the CV present a professional view of you as a candidate? So again, so all this is just going on your sheet. So you've sent me your CV, I've given you feedback, you're now reviewing your feedback and commenting on the style, the content, the length, the suitability and the changes that you're going to make. You take that sheet of notes and you take a scan of it and you send that to me prior to a discussion that we have. Okay, so that's the task. Essentially, you're creating notes on the feedback that you've been given on your first CV that you've submitted to me. So your job now is to prepare your notes. So you should have sent me your CV previously. You've got your feedback. So now all you're doing is preparing your notes, and you're photographing, I should say scanning is ideal, so scan to a PDF is the ideal, and then you're sending to me. You can do it on a Word document if you like, as long as you've got all that detail on there. So your name, the unit, the fact it's your discussion notes for 1.1 and 1.2, and then you've got something under each of those headings. So pause your presentation and complete that for me. So that would be 1.1. So you should have sent that 1.1 to me. You can now get on with 1.2 straight away. This is another thing that will be discussed in your professional discussion, but you also need to prepare notes that you're going to submit prior to that discussion. So I guess the first thing to consider is this idea. So you're going to be asked the question, why does the CV need to be kept updated? And you'll say, I don't, you'll probably sort of think of, hopefully, a number of ideas, but I want you to kind of prepare for that discussion, a bit like an interview in a way. You can kind of do it, but under pressure. Sometimes it's useful to have had preparation. So I want you to just firstly consider this idea here. If you've been with an employer in the industry, let's say the fitness industry, for 3 years, what could you have achieved over that time? What would you have hoped to have achieved? So just pause and have a little think about that, and just write down what you feel you could have achieved over that time. So hopefully you've had a little think and come up with some ideas about what you could achieve over that time. And one of the things you might have done is just gained additional qualifications. So you may have got something like an exercise referral award, which allows you to work with different client groups. Things like people with diabetes, people who've had cardiovascular problems, and that kind of puts you on a slightly different level. It gives you a deeper level of knowledge, allows you to work with a broader range of clients. It allows your gym maybe to attract a broader range of clients. So you're good for business if the more qualifications you have. You may have had additional responsibilities. So even the things that you think are being done quite sort of almost casually. You train colleagues. Managing people, giving people tasks. These are important responsibilities that future employers or even your present employer needs. So these are things that you will have gained experience of, I hope, if you're with someone for more than 3 years. You may have had experience completing projects, so it may be any aspect of if it's in the fitness industry, it could be any aspect of the club management or gym management, retaining members, elements of customer care, but ultimately bigger scale projects where you're kind of putting your name to it or being involved in something really positive is something that I hope would happen in employment over 3 years. You could also put things that you've achieved, so things like sales targets. In gyms, they're very keen on retaining members. So we talk about sort of retention targets. So if you've got, say, 100 members, and traditionally, let's say, 20 of those leave the gym each year, if you can retain an extra 10, in many places that becomes worth a lot of money. So these things are really important to show that you're taking on board the sort of purpose of the business. So the reasons why a CV needs to be updated is really for those kind of 4 things above. A lot of them, is you'll gain additional qualifications, you have been given additional responsibilities, you'll have gained additional experience, you've made additional achievements. But also, if you think, hopefully over that time your personal statement will be outdated, wouldn't it? You'll have joined and you were sort of looking for an entry role maybe. But the whole CV could begin to be outdated. So things like industries move quickly, don't they? If you think about fitness industry, the last couple of years it's been a lot of the sort of key buzzwords has been things like outdoor kind of portable fitness has become really big. Sort of body weight training has become really big. There's things that people are really into now that maybe sort of 5 years ago weren't really on the radar. And there's things that 5 years ago were really huge. So think about things like body pump, for example, was a big thing. There's less demand for it now. Things change. So the whole CV can begin to look a little bit outdated, and you want to kind of move with the times and make sure your CV reflects the sort of current buzzwords. So you're going to be creating notes on why a CV needs to be kept updated, and I want you to think about these two questions. So why a CV needs to be kept updated. If you're currently in employment already, you will need to keep your CV updated. For what reason? What do you think of? Just see if you can think of 3 off the top of your head. Write them down. And if you're looking for employment, you will need to keep your CV updated. For what reasons? Just pause the presentation and write them down. See what you come up with. So hopefully you had a look at those previous 2 questions, and were sort of, maybe you came up with a couple of ideas yourself that you can bring into this next point. So now we're going to create your notes. So you've got one set of notes which are on your CV feedback. We're now creating a second set of notes which is to support that same discussion. So the notes are to support your discussion with the tutor on why it is important to update your CV regularly. So I'm asking you to try and create notes that would allow you to speak for 30 seconds on at least 3 different reasons. You can write these notes on the back of the Unit 55 worksheet if you like. So in your assignment brief, there's one worksheet. There's a blank page on the back of that worksheet. You can pop your notes on there. It might be quite useful. So the topics I would encourage you to consider is, one of the reasons why we keep our CV updated is because we have new experiences. So what sort of new experiences can you have? Well, I gave you some ideas on the previous slides. If you want to go back, then just do that at any time. You may have developed new skills. So for example, I gave the example of someone taking an exercise referral qualification. So their new skills will be able to deal with people who have got sort of diabetes or cardiovascular problems. They'll have the skills to refer people on when other sort of professionals are needed. So you think about the new skills that you would be able to note on your CV. Well, I've just noted that one of the skills I need to develop is spelling. I can create notes on the of the following. So you can create notes on the need to update your CV because you may achieve new qualifications. And again, you're giving examples. It might be also important to make it stand out. So you want to regularly update your CV to make sure it kind of stands out from the crowd, to make sure it moves with the times, that key buzzwords are listed. There we are, using keywords. So again, if you think about the fitness industry, what might be current key buzzwords possibly weren't key buzzwords 5 years ago. Think about someone in computer programming. Programming languages change all the time. The key skills that are required from in that industry are always moving. So there's certain industries where key words are really important, and they're always changing. So it's kind of important that our CVs are able to sort of bring those out and show to employers that we're sort of moving with the times. So you might want to update your CV regularly to secure promotion. So again, just all let's say employers will keep your CV on file, and if you keep a regularly updated one, it shows them what your skills are, and sort of maybe reminds them. You might have done some qualifications on your own during outside of work time, and you want them to recognize that. You maybe want to remind them of the projects you've been involved in. So it could be useful in securing your own promotion. And also if you want to secure new employment. So if you keep a regularly updated CV, you can respond to a job advert in minutes, can't you? All you need to do is write a quick personal statement, send out your CV, you're in. Whereas if you've got to kind of go back and review everything every time, it becomes a bit of a painful process, and maybe your sort of enthusiasm wanes. It's a good idea when jobs are advertised to be in early, be the first one on their mat, and so having an updated CV means you're able to respond quickly to job opportunities. And lastly, again, just regularly updating your CV keeps it updated. It prevents it from looking outdated, keeps it relevant to the industry. So all you're asked to do then is really create notes on 3 of these points. I would say don't just choose the top 3. So maybe sort of use the top 3 as kind of one, and then choose 2 other reasons. Remember, these are notes that are to support a discussion, but you know it's a discussion where you'll be asked to describe the importance of regularly updating your CV. So you'll choose 3 of those topics, and you're going to create notes to allow you to speak for about 30 seconds on any of those topics, and to just take part in a discussion on why you regularly update your CV. Okay, so I would suggest you pause the presentation and create those notes. Okay, so hopefully you've created your notes. So I need you now to send me these things. Your original CV, which you should have done previously. Your notes on what feedback you received. So that was the first task that I gave you, was to create a page of your own notes on the feedback you received under those 5 headings. And your notes on why a CV needs to be kept updated. So hopefully we've got everything in order. We now need to arrange for your professional discussion. So send those to me and we'll arrange a discussion. We need about 15 minutes to go through these, and that's it. We'll just discuss, we'll go through your notes, I'll pose some questions, and we're away. We've completed 1.1. During our professional discussion, I just want you to consider what is the best environment for your professional discussion. So my place is a bit of a mess at the minute. I've got my sort of books at the back, but you know, the ideal is somewhere where you can sit in a nice upright position, with ideally a sort of blank wall or a bookcase behind you, somewhere that's quite quiet. And also think about how you're dressing. You know, this is a professional discussion. You should dress in a style that you're discussing with a fellow professional. So we'll arrange our discussion. You email me those that evidence. We'll arrange the discussion, and you'll have completed part 1.1. Now, the presentation is going to continue onto part 2. If you haven't had your professional discussion, you can still press ahead with the next section. So get that stuff sent, and whilst I'm responding, you can be preparing for the stuff that's just about to come. So that was the end of Unit 55, Part 1. We're now going to get on to Part 2, which is, I think, a little bit shorter actually. There's a couple of tasks I just need to guide you through, and this should be a very quick unit. So I would encourage you to get these parts 2 and 3 done. You could do them in one hit. They're really quick. Okay, so you have sent me so far your original CV. You've sent me the notes on the feedback you received. Your notes on why a CV needs to be updated, and we should either have had or have arranged a professional discussion. So we can still, if you haven't had your professional discussion, we can still go ahead with this section. So let's do that. Okay, so this part 2, there's 3 elements to it. Number 1 is you annotate your current CV, so the first CV that you gave me. So you're kind of almost looking back a little bit at that first CV and putting notes on what needs to be changed. You're then just creating a little list on what job roles, qualifications, experience may have changed since your first CV you submitted. You're then producing an updated CV for a given job role. Now, some of you have already done that for me, so hopefully this unit is almost, you know, you could do it in 30 minutes maybe. So let's break them down one by one. Some people it'll take a little bit longer. Some people I think should be able to do this quite quickly. So let's go. So part one, you're going to annotate your current CV. Now, this is difficult because we're all doing it by distance, but most of you should have the capacity to either take a physical CV and just write numbers on it, or take an online version and just write numbers on that online version, and the worst case scenario, just take a screenshot of it. What I've got on the right hand side is a picture, and I've just put numbers next to things that need changing. So when you're annotating, effectively what you're doing is you're just having a real close read of that CV. So remember, you've had feedback, and what you're doing is you're kind of making notes on that original CV about what needed to be changed. So here, in that personal statement, I've just got number 1. On the right hand side, I've just noted number 1. So the closer you can get it to the actual error, the better. But here I'll just put number 1, and then on the left hand side, I've got the things that need to be changed. So I've got personal statement needs updating and typos removed. Very broad, very general. For number 2, key skills, I've put here the key skills are very office based and they need to be more fitness orientated. So you're going to be creating a CV for a fitness job. And what I might have said to you, or what you might realize, is that your skills, you're trying to pick out buzzwords of that industry. So for this person, they've annotated, or I'm annotating it. I'm just putting number 2. There's change number 2, and on the left hand side, I've just written in what needs to change. So all you're doing is you're taking a blank version of your first CV that you sent. You're having a very close read in line with the feedback that I gave, and you're just noting on it numbers 1, 2, 3. I would say most of your CVs, you're looking for between 5 and 10 changes. So 5 and 10. So you just pop in the number on your CV where you've spotted an error or something that needs to be changed. And then you've got a separate sheet where you're just writing the changes that need to be made. So effectively you're annotating your current CV with notes on the required changes. You're just putting on your current CV where those changes need to be made. So that's your job. I would suggest you pause the presentation, revisit your original CV, and complete that task. So hopefully you've completed that previous task. So you're annotating your first CV, the one that you sent me first of all. So just noting in errors or things that need changing. So you can number them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then just noting what those errors refer to. So your annotated CV should now be complete. You're now completing the next part. So this is 2.2. So here, it's almost kind of in the title here. You're listing key changes in job roles, qualifications, experience, and achievements since your last update. So the very first CV you sent me, hopefully was a little bit of an old one, but there may have been changes that have happened in the meantime. So these could be related to job roles, including things like voluntary work you've done, experiences that you've had, but preferably work related, but other things can help, things like travel, these things can add to your CV. You may have had some achievements, and you may have developed your qualifications. So what you're going to do is you're going to create a detailed list with an explanation of each development since the last update. So take a fresh sheet of paper, or you can type it into a Word document, and I want you to create a detailed list with an explanation of each development since that last update. This will be asked to be submitted as part of your assignment work. So at the bottom of your detailed list, you should really have a minimum of, I would say, 4 things. I want you to summarise how you feel you have developed since your last CV. How have you become more employable? What skills have you gained? What makes you more sort of eligible for a potential employer? So again, I'm going to ask you to pause the presentation to create your list. So a detailed list of key changes, job roles including voluntary work, experiences, preferably work experiences, any achievements and any qualifications that you've developed, and then a summary at the end how you feel you've developed since your last CV. So pause the presentation and get that done. So hopefully you've now got, for part 2, you've got your annotated CV and you've got your list of how you've developed, your list of key changes since your first CV. You're now going to create an updated CV for a given job role. Now you will have done this as part of your Unit 27 applications, so this should be good to go. It may be useful to look over it again just to make sure the key sections are really sort of perfect. But what you're doing here is you're creating a CV for you to submit for a fitness instructor role at a gym. So, you know, you're in that industry, you're ready to submit, you know, you're looking around for jobs near you, and as soon as one comes up, you want to be able to reply to it and respond to it that day. So I want you to go over your personal statement again. Does it look like someone who's job hunting for the fitness industry, someone who's emphasizing their skills and their suitability for that fitness industry? Do the key skills emphasize key buzzwords from that industry? Is your education section correct? Does it have the school, the key dates you were there? Does it have the relevant qualifications you've gained? Does it have correct employment details or work experience details? And have you really outlined the skills that you gained from those experiences? And does your interest section match the industry? You know, in your interest section, you know, what would be great is if you could say, you know, I've trained for this. My training in a particular martial arts makes me, you know, it's giving me a really good understanding of anatomy, you know, whatever. So try and see how the interest section fits the industry. So give a good review of your CV and create a brand new or an updated CV for that fitness instructor role. So I'm going to ask you to just pause and go away and review the CV that you've got. Be really critical and make sure you've got a really good updated CV that you're now going to submit. So you gave me your first rubbish CV at the start. You're now giving me an updated perfect CV. So you've now finished part 2. So part 2 was the annotation of your CV, the list of your changes, key developments, and your creation of a brand new CV or an updated CV. You're now going to just create a worksheet that covers these 2 key things, 3.1 and 3.2. 3.1 is describe areas of a CV that should be updated on a regular basis. And 3.2 is producing a plan to keep that CV up to date. So I'll talk you through 3.1 and then I'll sort of whiz you through 3.2 a little bit. I think I needed to put a bit more in here, but I'll talk over it. Let's go. So have a think about the areas that need updating. So this is achieved by completing the worksheet on page 3 of your Unit 55 assignment brief. So it might be useful to just pause the presentation quickly and go and grab that so you know what's included. So a good start point for this is to just think what could change over 3 years in a job. So have a think. Imagine if you started a new job tomorrow, and time whizzed by, and you were able to transport yourself to 3 years' time. Think of all the things that could have happened in that time. You may have developed qualifications. You may have worked with different client groups. You may have worked with elite athletes. You may have worked with people who had had heart attacks 2 weeks before. You may have dealt with a fire. You could have overseen, or you could have helped a new manager to arrive at the club and sort of shown them around and settled in. You could have helped train new staff. So hopefully lots of things will have changed if you've spent 3 years in a job. So think about what needs to be updated in your CV. Now, I've just clicked on here. One thing that could change is personal details. Number one is you may have changed your address. You may have changed your phone number, your email address. So personal details need updating regularly. Make sure they're right. Your personal statement's also going to change, isn't it? You may have started out in an industry saying you want an entry role, and now you want to be a manager. You want to move into a management role. You want to move into a sales role. You want to branch out. You want to get more clients, whatever. So your personal statement is definitely going to change. You previously had potential, but now you've got skills. So that's really going to be critical. Your skills will have developed. So again, your demonstrable skills, you'll kind of be able to show more meaningful ways in which you've shown your skills for that industry. You may also have gained qualifications. I think whatever industry you're in, it's important to keep learning and keep developing. So you can always add more qualifications to your kind of repertoire. There may also be different changes in sections. So if you imagine me, old person, when I was straight out of education, that was the most important section on my CV. So I'd really show off, about my education. What was the most recent thing you did? What projects were you involved with in school or college? What skills did you get from school or college? But actually, having been in industry for a number of years, that becomes less important. And now you're able to much more explain about work-related developments and work-related improvements. So sections might change over time. If you're sort of 60 years old, it's more than 40 years since you were in school. So the relevance of that is, you're a different person, and your work history becomes the thing that's the most important. So the things that need changing we've got here is things like personal details, because you move, personal statement, because your ambitions are going to change, your skills are going to be constantly updating, constantly developing as you experience new things, you get the opportunity to try new things out. Your qualifications hopefully will have changed, but also the importance of these sections change. So for example, education becomes less important the older you are and the more sort of work experiences you can get across. You could also put in things like new links to your online presence and any sort of social media things that you've done. So maybe I wouldn't overemphasize this work, but if it's relevant to your work, that can be useful. So certainly some fitness trainers, if you're personal training particularly, and you're applying to be kind of take a personal training slot in a gym, they want to. Your social media presence might be something that can attract new clients into that area. So it may be interesting. I wouldn't overemphasize it, but it certainly can be a useful thing to promote. So on the worksheet then, really all you're doing is you're just filling out. So you're filling out that 3.1. So what specific areas of your CV should be updated regularly? Well, they're on the left of this. And why is it important? So you're able now, hopefully, to give me some ideas for the worksheet on page 3 of your Unit 55 assignment brief, then you can answer numbers 1 and 2. So what specific areas of your CV should be updated regularly? And you can give me, I would say, 3 or 4 of those at least, and then you can give me examples of why that's so important. So I would pause the presentation and get on with that now. So the second bit really asks you to sort of consider how often you should update your CV, and then at the end you're going to create a plan of when you will update your CV and how. So I'm going to talk through this bit and then just give you a bit of guidance on that on question 4. So the question 3 asks how often should you update your CV. Well, there's no sort of given date. Ultimately it's good practice to revisit it every 6 to 12 months. Most employers will ask you to kind of resubmit a CV periodically, so they've got up-to-date records of you, and to show you haven't stood still in that time, it's good to sort of give one that's up to date, reflects the skills that you've been demonstrating and the qualities that you have. So it's good practice to revisit it every 6 to 12 months. It may be, if you're not having success, it's useful to revisit it less than that, to sort of say, well, actually, no one's getting back to me, so maybe I need to review it a bit more sooner than every 6 months. But it's also important to review it whenever key things happen. So things like when you get a promotion, you need to update your CV. Your personal statement is going to change, your ambition is going to change, the projects you're involved with are going to change. If you change job, obviously you need to update your CV. You've got to put your latest employment on there, and you've got to be ready to adapt and move on. So it's important to update your CV to reflect current or your most recent job. If you've completed a major project, it might be useful. You can update your skills section. And if you've obtained a certification or qualification, so any extra qualifications need to be added to your CV. So it's kind of a working document, the sort of thing that you update regularly. And certainly if you've mastered a new skill, so this could be any sort of job related skill, it could even be sort of management or training other members of staff. So the more that you can add into your CV, the more it can become this kind of working document that is sort of regularly updated, and can be kind of sent out at a minute's notice because you're sort of primed and ready. So that's pretty much it. So how often should you update your CV? Well, the answer is really, it's good practice every 6 to 12 months. And then I want you to describe the reasons that you might update it at other times. So I don't want you to list what I've got on the left hand side. I want you to describe it. So that's your task. So I just would recommend you pause the presentation and just complete that whilst it's fresh in your mind, and then I'll just give you a little briefing on that last task. So just pause. Okay, so hopefully you've completed that. So now you're asked to, on question 4, just write a 2-year timeline of when you will update your CV and how. Well, this is difficult to do in a way because I've got how often should you update your CV? Well, over 2 years, I would probably suggest you're going to be doing it every, you might want to schedule in a 6th monthly review. So you could sort of say, well, actually, often the Christmas period is a period when you kind of, you have often a little bit of a downtime in your work, and you kind of reflect the new year. You sort of think, oh, actually, should I be doing more? Should I be changing job? So maybe you can schedule one in immediately in the new year. You sort of say, well, okay, January the 2nd, allow the 1st off, might be at first review. So you could say, well, okay, that's review number 1. I'm going to just schedule in a 6 monthly review every 6 months from that point. So that could be part 1. You also then want to look over the next 2 years and think, well, actually, when might I be getting qualifications? So you'll be finishing your gym instructor level 2 within the next few months, hopefully. And so that's a good point to review your CV. You'll also be doing a period of work experience. So you'll need to review your CV, I would say during and after that. You'd hope also that soon you'll get a job. So again, it would be useful to schedule in a proposed date when you think you might get that job. So the definites are going to be those 6 monthly reviews. The definites are going to be when you get your qualification. The definite is going to be when you do your work experience. Maybe a bit of an unknown is about the actual work, the job that you'll get. So you can kind of put a rough date and maybe just next to it put TBC, to be confirmed. But as long as you've got those 4 definites, the 6 month reviews, the point at which you get your qualification and your work experience, that to me is ideal. And put in anything else, any other skills, projects you may be involved in, any development in your world that you might want to add into your CV to put in for a sort of a review. So the question is, write a 2-year timeline below of when we will update your CV and how. So on the left hand side you could put today. On the right hand side you've got 2 years time. So you might say, okay, well, today on whatever it is, let's say June the 1st, we've got our initial review. Let's say August or maybe September is going to be a review, because you hopefully have kind of got close to achieving your gym instructor. You might have one immediately in the new year, January, and then you've got one 6 months after that and 6 months after that. Inside that timeline, just put any other dates where you feel you might have achieved qualifications, are likely to have changed job, or have been involved in major projects that you can add into your CV. So from today, or June the 1st, whatever, you definitely want one every 6 months, but you're also identifying points within that 2-year period where you will review your CV because major things will have happened. So now all I want you to do is send me this information. So you're sending me the discussion notes on the CV feedback. 1.2, those notes were in the same thing as above. You're sending me the discussion notes which were on the importance of regularly updating a CV. You should have already sent those to me. You're sending me your annotated CV and the list of changes, and you're just simply sending me that worksheet 55, and that's it. So this unit should really have been a quick one. Really the central kind of part of it is that professional discussion, which I will have recorded, but everything else is relatively quick tasks. So hopefully you're able to get on with it and get that work into me as quick as you can. So that's the end of Unit 55. Well done.